Hello, everyone. We got a comment from Matt, a very good photographer. I forget where exactly he's from, but Matt was talking about from that last video when to shoot your real estate photography the best time. And he was commenting on, well, what about exteriors? And for the most part, if you saw that last video, you saw that I'm really recommending that you guys shoot your interiors when it's very, very bright out. And I went ahead and pulled up. I know what Matt is talking about when he's talking about exterior problems. He's talking about like sometimes you get these entrances, for example, like the front door, and it's like a cave, like or leading up to the front door. I don't have access to all my files right now, so I just had to use this one. But we're going to try and sort of simulate what my point is. And I just feel like usually you can push the highlight and shadow sliders to a reasonable extent and get your files where they need to be. So we're going to go ahead and get back to camera raw or the defaults here. And what Matt's talking about is when you shoot in the middle of the day, and this isn't that extreme of an example because the sun is maybe behind a cloud right now. It's actually a kind of a nice time, but you're going to get a lot of these really deep, dark shadows in a lot of cases. And whereas other parts of the home are in the sun and they're already well exposed. But the first way I'm going to talk about is you can go ahead and boost up this shadow slider. And I feel like people might be a little bit shy, but I feel like for real estate, you could actually go ahead and go all the way with this. And you might, what I tend to do a lot of times is bring my blacks down a little bit. That tends to help just so it doesn't flatten it out completely, because that's essentially what you're doing when you push up the shadows all the way like that. And you might want to pull down your highlights after you do that, but in this case I don't even think we need to. So the first way to sort of tackle those midday problems of dynamic range, meaning shadow and highlight, is your shadow and highlight slider. Okay, we're going to look at another way here. We're going to just assume we started off. So let me just adjust this something like I would normally. Let's see, I apply a preset. I actually don't have that preset anymore, but we'll just go ahead and use this one for the, that should be fine. And that should apply a little contrast and little stuff. And so I have a little bit of highlight. Let's just say this wasn't enough though. Let's just say I pushed the highlights and I pushed the shadows and it wasn't enough. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open this image up into Photoshop. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to all happen in real time because we're making this video in one shot, but we'll get that into Photoshop. So this is way number 2. Remember, the first way was highlights and shadows. Let's say that just didn't work enough for you. Well, we're getting back in here. Single raw file, okay? That's the big difference here. And if you look up some of the stuff on, I believe it's, I forget the name of what they call it, but a lot of people are theorizing nowadays that it doesn't even matter what you shoot your raw photos at, you can just like pump it up. So we're gonna head over to the exposure slider here. We're gonna bump this up at least a stop. You could probably go more, and I'm seeing the shadows back there aren't quite good yet, so I'm gonna go at least a stop and a half here. And once again, this is just the second way you could take care of your dynamic range problem. Let's go to 2 stops, okay, because I feel like it's not bright enough. So we're getting it pretty bright back there. Just keep in mind, the brighter you go, sort of the harder it's going to be to meld things together. Okay, so you might want to try a stop when you're starting out. I went 2 stops here just to sort of prove the point. So we're going to open that up. Remember, this is all the same file. I'm not using multiple shots here. I'm using the same file. So I'm going to pull that in, and we'll wait for my getting old and slow now computer. It used to be pretty good. Now it seems like it's getting a little slower. And we went, oh, I just did that like you guys already are understanding. Let me go in reverse there. So we have these 2 photos now in Photoshop. They're the same file, right? But the only difference was I really pumped up the exposure on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and get the move tool and hold down shift and just pull that guy up on there. And what we have now, all we have here is just a layer where we have overexposed layer on top, and then we have our sort of what we feel like is a properly exposed layer on the bottom. And so we can just go ahead and mask that with a black mask by holding down Alt the Alt key and clicking the mask button. And we're going to go ahead and go back here with our brush to some of these areas that we didn't feel were quite getting enough light, okay? And you can do this. This is really gonna be pretty easy to do, even if you have like I think what Matt was getting at, when you have, like I was saying, I know I've been there, like when the sun is out, it's straight overhead, and there's like a white sidewalk and the sun is shining on all this stuff, but then there's like a cave like entry, and I know that's what he's talking. You could even get in here a little bit. You see how easy that is to just sort of lighten that up. So highlights and shadows. Then there's this method where you're actually using the same raw file to get in there, and you can, let's check out the difference that made. Just, we just really, you might want to watch out you don't go outside here, because it's going to look a little funny. So try and stay, relatively in that area. So let's just see the difference there, and you can see that does a pretty good job, and it looks pretty good. I mean, it doesn't look like out of place or anything. So I hope you can see. I wouldn't necessarily like want to lighten this up back here, but this is just for example's sake. Maybe there was something more important back there in your photo, right? Like a children's play set or something. You wanted to lighten that up, but it was in shadow. You might want to try this method, okay? The last method we're going to go into, this is something I go into in my courses, so we're just going to cover this very quickly, but in this case, once again, remember, this isn't that extreme of an example, but I don't have all my files right now. You can see in this case right here, let me get the, I do this often, and you need a pretty big light to do this, but I'm just feeling like sometimes I personally like to light things. Like, that's just, I love it. I'm interested in it. If I couldn't light things, like, I'd be bored when I went to these jobs. So even when I go outside sometimes, even though I'm trying to go as fast as I can, a lot of times, and this is again the third way I'm going to recommend to you, is go ahead and light things and use compositing. Okay, so you can see here, I was maybe feeling like, oh, they can't see this area that great back here. So I actually went in and I threw some light in there. And you're just able to sort of composite that in the way we just did. You saw, you lay those two frames on top of each other. And a lot of times what this does is it'll bring like really, really dull bushes and stuff. It'll just totally bring them to life. Like, say, these guys over here, you can just totally bring them to life, like if you wanted to. So, guys, that's 3 ways, because I think Matt had a good point and everything, and I would, for the most part, if you're trying to go for like a home run image, that you're going to have to sort of time exteriors maybe a little bit more. It's really delicate, because the house faces 2 ways, right? If the sun is over here, then you're going to have an ideal time for the house at a certain time, but then the other side of the house is not going to be ideal, right? There's no way. That won't work that way. So it's a little bit trickier to answer this. But the point of this video has been, there's ways to tackle the problem if you go ahead and shoot the interiors in the middle of the day. There's ways to tackle the exterior problems. And I also believe that actually the sun at midday looks best a lot of times, in my opinion, especially for like backdoor pools and stuff like this, where it's just like the sun is just totally gleaming. It's just beautiful, making all that contrast, and the colors and everything is just beautiful. I think that is the best time actually for, even if you're considering all this, like, it's sometimes harder to shoot, because midday sun, you're just getting that really contrasty light. Okay, so I hope that helped you take care of these problems you might be having, and the sort of problem that Matt brought up about the dynamic range. And also, there's more to this. There's more to it. You might, if you want to shoot a really home run image, it might be at a later time in the afternoon and stuff like that, okay? But we're sort of keeping with that theme where we're doing real estate photography here, and you're trying to get through the house as quickly as possible, and you have a business too, right? So I never did this, but I think it would actually make sense to have like a afternoon package for your exterior, something like that. When somebody wants something extra special, you can only do one of those a day, right? Whereas the midday stuff, you're just fine. It's the best time to shoot real estate, in my opinion. You can do any house from like 8 a.m. as long as the sun's up to like say 5 or 6 p.m. You could shoot in there, and it's all sort of the same because it's really bright out. But when you get to the afternoons, the late afternoons, the light sort of changes, and that might look really good for certain homes. You might want to charge a premium for that because you only have one of those slots a day. And I'm not necessarily calling this a twilight slot. I'm calling it like an afternoon backyard. You know, maybe if they have a sunset in their backyard, something like that, you might want to charge a premium for like the scraping low sun sessions. Okay, that could be. I don't see many people do that, but I really think that should be sort of like a premium, you know, a backdoor. I would call them afternoon or golden hour shoots or something like that. Okay, so that's a little bit getting off topic. I hope these 3 ways that you saw here helped you in tackling that problem of dynamic range when you shoot your exteriors. And thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.